Bienvenidos a Más Allá del Fitness. Yo soy Memo Silva, coach de fitness, salud y nutrición con más de 6 años en esta industria. El fitness va más allá de entrenar y comer bien. Es estar bien mentalmente, con tu familia, con tu trabajo, tu crecimiento personal y más. Fitness es lo que tú decides que es mejor para tu vida. To all my English listeners, this is my first episode in English, which I intend is the beginning of more episodes in English, but I thought in giving you a heads up that so far this is the only one. If you are a hybrid athlete or would like to train like a hybrid athlete, you can just hit me up a message at memosilva.fit on Instagram. Alex Viada is often held responsible for the popularization of hybrid athlete as a term and a thing. He wrote the Hybrid Athlete book, and since then, Alex and his team at Complete Human Performance has continued to educate and coach thousands of athletes in all of the endurance and strength spectrum. You're the first English-speaking guest in the podcast, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here to share some knowledge. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, for your time, and for the time trying to connect this thing.
You know, technology is great and works wonderfully until it doesn't. So I think we're good. Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
I was looking for some of your personal records, but didn't find a lot of information. And I know a lot of people know you for being the hybrid coach, but you have some amazing accomplishments. So for the people that don't know you, can you tell me your weight, your best lifts on powerlifting, and endurance records like the mile, ultra, Ironman?
You know what, man? So I stopped talking about those a while ago because at this point they're so far back that I'm like, you know, because look, I've been doing one thing and another for I think about 15 years here in the whole hybrid space. So I think the thing I'm most proud of is probably when I ran my first 50 miler, I was still a 700-pound deadlifter. So that was kind of like back in the day. Those have always been my two best things is kind of my long distance, doing ultras, doing triathlons, and I was still a 600-pound squatter, 700-pound deadlifter then. I was a 400-pound bencher, but that seems to have gone by the wayside. So that was kind of the realm that I was in. I think this is about 10 years ago and about 10 years younger. So now I'm about 230 pounds now. I currently squat about 585, deadlift about 700. I am not as fast as I used to be. I can still run about a 540 to 545 mile on a perfect day. That's on a perfect day. But that's what happens when you get to your mid-40s. It's a little bit tougher to keep it all going. But that's it. I think for me, it's mostly I've had the opportunity and privilege to dabble in a lot of different types of events. And, you know, it was never the fastest or strongest out there, but I was always able to do a damn good job at it. So that was personally what I'm most proud of.
And that's some very impressive numbers. Like, even though that now they have decayed, you still have like a pretty good strength, and a 545 mile, it's still a really good number.
No, I appreciate, and it's funny because that I think I realized too as I've gotten older how lucky I was to be able to have the kind of performances I did then now. And I know you understand this as you get older and you deal with a few more injuries and all that, and you realize how privileged you were to be relatively injury free when you were doing your best. So that's me.
Yeah, like when we started training, like in the assessment week, I got the injured deadlifting. I've never had an injury before deadlifting. Yep. And that was just like, my birthday was like 1 week before, and that was like my welcome to the 34 years. So yeah, that happens. And then you see like, man, this can't be.
It's and it's really funny, I think, because I think a lot of us, especially in the hybrid space where, it's sometimes hard to keep a long-term view on everything because, we work so hard, and when you're doing any kind of hybrid training, you're working very hard, and every day, you're putting in hard work somewhere. But since you're working on everything a little bit of a time, it's not always easy to see the long-term results on any one thing. When you're just powerlifting and you know what your numbers are and you know what they're going to be, or when you're just running and you know how fast you are, you know how fast you want to be, it seems like the gains come a little bit faster. And I think, when you're doing hybrid training and you're pushing so hard and you're not seeing any one result going so high, I think a lot of us push ourselves a little bit too hard sometimes. And it's really easy. You just have a lot more ways you can get injured, a lot more ways you can hold yourself back, and it's harder to keep that perspective.
There's a lot of things that I want to talk about, but first, and I assume is the first question you get asked, and you get asked a lot. Can you tell me what hybrid training is, and more importantly, what it is not? Because
yes.
I have several conversations with different people, and I believe it's highly misunderstood still to the day. So since I have the source with me, please clarify the term.
So hybrid training is any type of training of 2 or more disciplines. It could be 2 disciplines, 3 disciplines, 10 disciplines. But what makes it hybrid is that each discipline does not explicitly support the other ones. For example, if I am doing powerlifting and long distance running, any progress I make in powerlifting is not necessarily going to make me a better runner. So if I compete in a powerlifting meet, all the running training I'm doing is probably not going to help my total. So a hybrid athlete is one where, and if I do 3 different sports and they don't support each other, I'm a hybrid athlete. So the important thing there is that I am doing all these different kinds of training, and each one at best just doesn't help the other ones. So for example, if I am doing powerlifting and long distance running, any progress I make in powerlifting is not necessarily going to make me a better runner. So if I compete in a powerlifting meet, all the running training I'm doing is probably not going to help my total. So a hybrid athlete is one where, and if I do 3 different sports and they don't support each other, I'm a hybrid athlete. So the important thing there is that I am doing all these different kinds of training, and each one at best just doesn't help the other ones. So what sets us apart is the idea that if you are a hybrid athlete, it can be any 2 sports. It can be any 10 sports. The only thing that matters is hybrid athletes have to juggle different types of training and juggle different stressors, and realize that you can progress all you want in one, and that might not help you progress in the other. So you have to, by definition, do all these different things and do each one well, but understand that if you push too hard over here, you could compromise your performance over there. And that's the important part. That's what makes it so difficult.
And also the main thing I would say is to progress in both sports, right?
Exactly.
Because it would be like a lot of people are just doing strength training and running, and they say they are hybrid, but they are not, because they are just doing both of them, right?
Exactly. And one thing I always want to remind people is, if you are somebody who's just been lifting all your life, and you've been lifting and you're very strong and you're very big, and you say, hey, look, I want to be healthier, I want to start running. And let's say you start running 5 days a week, and you lift 1 or 2 days a week, and you're still very big, you're still very jacked, but you're not lifting enough to progress. You're not really hybrid. You're now a runner with a good strength background, and that's fine. Like, that's still great. You could be a great runner, a great athlete. You can work really hard. You can be very healthy. But since you're not trying to progress in lifting anymore, it's not really hybrid. And I think that's where people get very they have a lot of arguments, is that they say, well, they're still hybrid. They still lift and run. Yes, but it's not as complicated to create a good program when you're allowing yourself to get worse, or to backpedal, or deteriorate a little bit, or detrain in one. Because if you have a very strong base, you can do the bare minimum in one area and put all your attention over here, and you'll progress here very well, and over here not so much. So, again, I think it's important that people know that being a hybrid athlete isn't better. It doesn't mean you train harder. It just means it's a little bit more complicated to construct the proper program when you have to serve all these different masters equally.
Yeah, that's key. And I've talked to a lot of people about this. Like, it doesn't matter if you're not hybrid. Like,
right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't.
Right.
It's just like one type of training, and if you like it, good. But I see also this a lot. Like, it can be all the way around. Like, also a runner that has an amazing background of running and is no longer progressing in the run, but then gets jacked and lift and progresses in the lifting, and it is not necessarily hybrid.
Exactly. And, I myself, I've always lifted, I've always run, I've always biked, but I will go through training phases when, for example, a while back, I had been sick for a while, respiratory infection, all that. My running felt terrible. I was only running twice a week, very short distances, and doing one zone 2 bike session per week. My lifting progress was great. And I was still biking, I was still running, I was still lifting, but it wasn't hybrid because I did so little running and biking, and my lifting just became exponentially better because it was much easier to just focus on the one. So, it happens. And, like I said, it's important that people realize it's not better or worse. It's just a style of training. It's a way of approaching programming where you have to think very carefully about how much of each you need to do and how to best recover so that you can train the other portion of it equally as hard.
Yeah, and also some people claim that any good program will help you get some PRs over time. And I believe that this can be true for beginners when almost everything works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And if you have been pushing your training for a while, or you have like 3, 4, 5, 10 years in training, I'm pretty sure that you know that this is not true, and that you have really be very careful with how you put every part of your training in a cycle.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's really important too is for a lot of types of training, if you're, say, a single sport athlete, you can see progress week to week. Even if you don't necessarily, set new PRs every week, you kind of can track your recovery. You know when you're feeling better, you know when you're feeling worse. When you're doing a hybrid program and you have a lot of years of training under your belt, you can train for, you can have 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks go by, and all of your training may feel terrible. And, your runs may feel slow because your squat, your legs are tired from your squat workout. And, the next full body lift after your hard run session can feel awful. So you also need to have a little bit more, I think, trust in the program. And even because the feedback isn't immediate, you don't always feel good. You always have this level of fatigue that masks your fitness. So you have to be confident enough in this program development to understand that it's a slower process, and you're not always going to easily be able to tell what works and what doesn't. Sometimes it's going to take you trying something for several weeks to see if something works and something doesn't, and you're not always going to progress. It's very easy in a hybrid program to say, okay, great, my running is going great, but all my lifts are terrible. And then you don't actually know that your lifts are terrible until you relax, taper the running a little bit and go for some PRs. And that's the only time you'll find out if your hybrid program actually was working or not. And it's very challenging.
Aside from the taper, how would you know if it's working? Is there another way? Because as I told you before, like when I was preparing for the marathon and my powerlifting, personal competition, like the most I could deadlift in training was 405 pounds. And I was scared that I wasn't progressing, because every time I tried to do the deadlift, it felt super heavy. I felt bad. I got dizzy, and I was like, shit, I'm not progressing. I might not hit a PR. And then after just a taper week, I got my PR. So how do you know?
And that's a really good point, because when you have constant fatigue, you can't hit that top 5% of your speed or power or anything else. I think that's why it's really important for athletes to also understand that they're not going to be able to put in big numbers every session. I think they need to look at the easier work. They need to look at, okay, how quickly are you moving the bar when you pull 405? How good is your form? Are your legs stronger in other movements? Like if, say your deadlift is still bad, but your squat feels consistently good and feels consistently better, and you're doing Romanian deadlifts and you're doing more volume than you've ever done before, and your deadlift may not look good when it's heavy, but it moves fast and it feels strong, you know that you have all the component parts that you need for a big lift. And, I think if you're familiar with like Westside Barbell and the conjugate training program, that's why I like so many of the theories that came from conjugate training. And a lot of that is breaking down a lift or breaking down a sport performance, whether it's a running race or a lift or a triathlon, into all the different components of fitness. Like for your deadlift, we're looking at leg strength, we're looking at back strength, we're looking at form, we're looking at rate of force production. So even if we don't see the whole lift looking perfect during training, if we know that all the pieces that make up this lift, all the little parts that you put together for the final lift are getting better, we know that, okay, this part is better, this part is better, this part is better, this part is better. Even though we haven't peaked and tested it all, we know that every piece of it has improved. So when we recover, we know that it's going to look good. But that's why it's so important too that, even if you're feeling bad on hybrid sessions, you go in for your lifting session and you're feeling terrible, and if the bar is moving slowly, you say, hey, okay, I need to take a break. Every time I get in there and lift, my form needs to be good, my quality needs to be good, my speed needs to be good, because you need to approach, even if you're a casual hybrid athlete, you need to approach every session as if you were like a professional athlete who, hey, I need to make this lift look good. I need to focus on quality. If I let myself get sloppy, I'm just teaching myself bad form. All those tiny little important things that if you're a super elite athlete are very important, are also important in a hybrid program, because if you're a single sport athlete and all you're doing is working on your deadlift, if your form gets a little bit worse, but you're getting so much stronger that it doesn't matter, you'll still set PRs. But for hybrid athletes, that's why, if you're a coach and you're working with athletes who are interested in this whole hybrid thing, and, you're telling them, no, we got to, focus on your form here. Okay, let's do this again, but do it right, proper breathing patterns, brace properly and all that. They may look at you and eventually go, oh my God, just let me lift, please. But it's really important. It's so important for them to realize that you focusing on the quality of their session is just as important as the intensity. Because at the end of the day, we're practicing for a sport, and every piece needs to get better so that when we get to competition, we actually have a final product. We built all the pieces here and there, and when we put it together, no piece is of bad quality. Every piece is the best quality we can make it.
And I believe that is one of the key pieces of knowledge that I got from you in this training cycle that I appreciate so much.
Oh, that's great.
We talk about to attack the warm-up sets.
Yes.
And trying to move the bar as fast as possible and with the form that you will do in the lift.
Yeah.
And I can see that it exponentially made me better, and I can see it on the deadlift.
Yeah.
Every single set, because before I was just warming up, just moving through the weights and just getting to the main set to trying to move it, the heavy set. But then when I started to warm up and trying to move the bar as fast as possible since the beginning of the warm up, it changed everything, and I can feel it in my deadlift.
Yeah. One of the places I saw that the most is, I used to have the same problem in a lot of ways, especially when I came from when I was just doing powerlifting. I would do my warm-up sets just so I could get them out of the way and okay, now it's time for the work. And sometimes in more hybrid programs, by the time I would get to the work, early on, my programs weren't always perfect. I would be so tired that the top set, I might miss a lift on the day and say, oh, well, I've wasted the whole day. And it was actually working with some of the coaches at Old Muscle Driver, Glenn Pedley, the Olympic weightlifting coach, and watching his athletes on their warm-ups. And you almost couldn't tell how much weight was on the bar because they always took every single lift very seriously. They would be doing the empty bar, and they would approach it just as seriously and just as focused as if they were doing a maximum set. And I remember watching all these athletes, and I couldn't tell if this was a warm-up set, if this was a work set, if they were just demonstrating something for other people. It all looked the same. And that really made an impression on me. And I think that's when I realized that if I take every single warm-up set as an opportunity to practice the lift and practice how I approach the bar and practice how I focus and practice the setup and breathing and bracing, even if I don't feel good and don't do a max set that day, I've still practiced the lift properly 30 times. 30, 35 times. So that's still a good amount of work. Even if I say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to hit that top set, or, I had to go about 5 pounds lighter, 10 pounds lighter, 20 pounds lighter. That's okay, because I've still built some quality. So I think I really appreciate that. That's kind of one of the big things, because that's, the essence of hybrid training is because you're doing so many things and you're not going to have infinite energy for all of them. You've got to treat everything with respect and treat it get the best quality you can. So that's great.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's also something you see on Chinese weightlifter. Well, in all the weightlifters, but I believe Chinese are great example. When you see them warming up, they move the bar very fast, even only with the bar, and that's the example of practicing and doing that rate of force production really fast.
Yeah, and it's honestly the same thing for runners as well. And talk about doing speed work and doing quality work and everything else. And it's not saying that every session has to be perfect, but it is saying that you have to take every session seriously. And even if you're tired, there's no such thing as a wasted session. You can still get some quality out of the work. And, again, I think that's the thing that lets a lot of these weightlifters train with as much frequency as they do. Because not every session is crushing, but every session makes them better.
And also another piece of knowledge that I appreciate is like the introduction of plyometrics for running, and not only the introduction of plyometrics, but the right plyometrics for running. Because I was doing before like box jumps and single unders and that type, but that didn't translate to my running. You need to do single leg hops and absorb the impact with one leg. And and I also feel the change when I started doing that. And I believe every runner should be doing this. And every beginner also, if I would start to run tomorrow from zero, my best recommendation would be start doing plyometrics before.
Yeah, and to me that was such another one that I think a lot of great coaches do, and you see, you see top level marathon runners in their training programs doing it, top level 5K runners and top level mile runners, and you say, well, they wouldn't be wasting their time doing this. Like there must be a reason. And when you look at all of the data on, things like ground contact time and, even injury and balance, and it all looks like it's really good. And then you see what they do, and it was just explained to me by a running coach that, well, running is just jumping. Your feet are both off the ground at a time. Running is just jumping forward very quickly. I was like, I go, well, why wouldn't you practice better jumping then? And that's why so much of the bounding and everything, quick rebound, and having that, lower limb stiffness that they talk about, it makes so much sense. And once you start doing it, you go, wow, this feels amazing. I'm in control of my legs. There's good rebound. I don't feel like I'm just, thumping along the ground. And it makes such a difference.
In one of the courses, you talk about a lot of the injuries that come from running. And the summary for me is like basically it all comes down to how you absorb the impact, balance, and you can prevent a lot of the issues from running just by practicing plyometrics and single leg hops.
Yeah, and it's because a lot of the data actually that got me interested in this was looking at the likelihood. So when you look at, it's very hard to predict running injury. I don't like, and we all know that you can't say, oh, well, this is going to injury proof you. This is going to bulletproof your knees. So like, no. You can't prevent injury. But a lot of research looks at runners who have, like, let's say had shin splints or had stress fractures. And one of the things they always test is, okay, well, now that they've had this, we can see how likely they are to get it again. And every runner that had superior balance and coordination, which is one of the things that is improved by plyometrics specifically, everyone who's had that has a reduced risk of re-injury of all of these things. And that's kind of where a lot of that, my interest in it started, was a lot of people say, hey, look, especially hybrid athletes, they go in and they say, look, I'm not a lifelong runner. I might be a little heavier than most runners. I want to start on a running program, but every time I do, I get shin splints after, a couple months, or I'm worried about injury. And when you look at all of this, you realize that a lot of hybrid athletes may have strong bones and be very strong and have a lot of muscle mass, but we really have a lot of work to do when it comes to being good runners, developing good running mechanics. It's such a different process. And, like it or not, most people don't run enough. And if you're completely sedentary, you're probably going to start with walking for a couple of weeks or months. And then you're going to start slowly running and all that. But if you're already athletic, you think, I'm going to get out there and run. But you may not be any better a runner than the person who's just been sitting on the couch for months and months and months. So it's a little bit of that combination of being, a little bit heavier, wanting to be aggressive, possibly even having, better cardiovascular shape than a sedentary person, because lifting does help a little bit, but then realizing that we're starting from scratch with our coordination. And so it's going, yes, get on those plyometrics. People love skipping them, but it's important to do. Even just 5 or 10 minutes before a run session, it makes such a difference.
Hybrid is just fitness, and we have been doing this for a while, is some of the claims that I've seen on social media regarding hybrid training. And although I have not been here in this space forever, I know this was not true. Like before the appearance of CrossFit, for me, it was like when I believe it started to look at, okay, you can do both. And it was almost at the same time when you published the book. But what would you say to these claims?
I think it's really interesting, because if you've been in the fitness space for long enough, and they said you've been in this for a while, you've seen this transition, but remembering that going through, even back to, and I'm going to sound really old saying this, I'm not that old, but going back all the way to like the late part of last century and like the end of the Cold War and everything else, everything in the Western side of things was all about running, right? Everybody in America was running, and we had good runners, and Western Europe was all good runners, and a lot in the Eastern Bloc and, the Soviet Union and China was all strength training, was all the weightlifters and, all the strongmen and everybody, that was kind of the divide.
In a recent conversation with a friend, and based on the definition of hybrid training, I believe CrossFit athletes, the competitive athletes, they actually train like hybrid athletes, trying to maximize as many sports as possible. Do you believe that competitive CrossFit is hybrid training?
That's a really good question, because I think the fact that CrossFit competition has technically can ask anything of you would make it pretty hybrid. And I think that's because, CrossFit, I think some years more than others, does a pretty good job in competition of saying, hey, today we're going to go for an 8-mile trail run. Okay. Not so much in competition, but sometimes in the games you'll see things like that. And so, yes, you have to be good at so many things. And I think it's enough things that one type of fitness isn't going to carry you through all of it. Like, for example, for a number of years there, CrossFit tended to be very focused. We knew that, to be a good competitive athlete, you had to have a good, your Olympic lifts had to be really good. You had to have a really good engine for that. You had to be a really good rower. There was like 3 or 4 things that you knew made up a good CrossFit athlete. And I think, thankfully, with some of the competitions, it's branched out a little bit more, and you're seeing people being rewarded for being a really good cyclist, if they have a mountain biking event. I think CrossFit could do a little more, but I think the random aspect of it forces the athletes to train like hybrid athletes if they want to be really good. And if you just do CrossFit, if you just go to CrossFit class, you're probably not hybrid, you're just following CrossFit programming. But I think if you're one of the top level CrossFitters and you're doing things like doing trail runs in the off season, and maybe like, training in some powerlifting for a while, and, doing all these different things because you never know what's coming, I think those are hybrid athletes. So I think CrossFit as a sport, if you just do CrossFit and just do CrossFit training, I don't think you're necessarily hybrid, but I think good CrossFitters are also hybrid athletes. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
What would be the main advice that you will give to people looking to maximize their endurance and strength / hypertrophy?
I would say the best piece of advice is, first of all, in the endurance, the most important thing is make sure you're doing things you love. So, because there's a lot of people that say, oh yeah, I want to be in better cardiovascular shape and I want to be able to run a 5K. I just don't like running that much. When you go, maybe you shouldn't run a 5K, but find something you like to do. Do you like doing the assault bike? Do you like using the rower? Do you like going for hikes? Do you like going trail running? I think since you're doing so many different things and you're going to be hitting points of frustration with each one, you have to find enough things in all types of training that you love doing, that are going to keep you motivated and keep you getting out there, because you're not always going to see that immediate progress. You're not always going to get that immediate satisfaction of hitting a PR every couple of weeks or anything like that. And it's going to be really hard if you're getting all your PRs in lifting to get yourself to go out and run if you're hating your runs lately. And that's something that happens to a lot of hybrid athletes, I think, is they get frustrated with their progress in one area and they feel like, oh, I'm just not good at this, and their motivation starts going down. So the thing I always tell them is, look, remember you're doing this for fun because you want to be able to do anything. And that's the important thing is whatever you like doing. If you don't like running, but you love hiking, if you don't like being outside, but you love doing spin classes, do it. The whole point of hybrid training is to be able to look at any sport, any event you want to do and say, I want to be able to do that. I may not be a great runner, but I want to go do that trail 10K over there. That looks really fun. That's through a park I love running in. Great. So I think that's the most important piece of advice I would give people, because at the end of the day, it's for all of the precision that you need to take it seriously and treat yourself like an athlete. You also have to be having a good time when you do it. You have to find little wins wherever you can, because it can be pretty frustrating sometimes. So
yeah. And I believe that one of the main things of hybrid training, for at least for me, is just having fun doing all of the stuff. Like, I was not having so much fun just lifting weights.
Yeah.
I would not have fun just running. So part of it, the main thing is to have fun and being able to express, as you say, my fitness in different areas. Like this Sunday, I've never done a trail run, and man, I can do it. I can go for it. Yeah. So.
And that's the thing I love to see. If somebody is like, hey, I'm training for HYROX, I want to be really good at it. Oh, there's a trail race coming up next week. Is that going to screw up my programming? I would die before I say no to that. Like, even if it does screw up their programming, it's worth it, because that's what they're there for. It's going, yes, please do it. Do something new. Do something different. Because part of being a hybrid athlete is also realizing that, yes, it's harder in some ways, but also the nice thing is, I don't know what the expression would be, but the idea of newbie games. When you first start something, you get better at it so quickly.
Yeah.
Hybrid athletes, we look around and we go, well, if we can do anything we want, there's like 10 different sports out there I can see newbie games in. So, hey, I've never done trail running before. I go out there, I'm like, wow, I'm really bad at this, but I can focus on this for 4 weeks and suddenly be a much better trail runner. So it's that excitement of trying new things. And in the process, you may say, hey, you know what? Doing that reminded me that here is one area of fitness that I'm not very good at. Here's a time domain I'm not very good at. Here's a movement I'm not very good at. And sometimes just fixing that may end up making you a better athlete overall. So,
yeah, that was actually me asking for, I'm going to HYROX and I have a trail run. Can I do it?
Yeah, and that's just it. It's like, yes, absolutely. Like, go out, go do it. It's a different time domain that you've trained in. It's different types of terrain. Like, it's going to be a learning experience no matter what. And I think good hybrid athletes as well, I think one of the biggest characteristics of a good hybrid athlete is also this constant curiosity and interest. You go to a trail run and you speak to trail runners, and you hear a little bit about how they approach their sport. And I believe that you can learn so much from different athletes in different disciplines. You go to a powerlifting meet and you talk to powerlifters about how they approach competition, or how they think about their lifting, or what their biggest accomplishments are. And every time you spend time with these athletes, you learn a little bit more of their language. And learning like someone's training and sport language really helps you learn so much. You pick up so much from all these people that I think that's the other thing I would say is keep an open mind and talk to athletes who spent their whole life doing a sport. You will pick up more in a 10-minute conversation at the race finish line talking to another runner than you could in like months of training by yourself.
That's amazing, and a great way to see it, and I love it. How can you build muscle? I believe that one of the main goals of people is some runners, they don't want to look like runners, they want to build muscle.
Yeah.
How can you build muscle on a low volume, in quotes, strength training, when volume is such an important component of hypertrophy?
I think so. I know there's a lot of debate on the role that volume plays in hypertrophy, and I know that there have been studies that have shown everywhere from like 8 sets per muscle group per week all the way up to like 24, 25, 26. And one of the things I like to think about when it comes to hypertrophy is kind of this whole effective reps concept, which the whole idea behind the effective reps is that every time you do a set, the last couple reps are really the ones that matter, because what we're aiming for is maximum tension in the muscle, all the muscle fibers contracting and getting a little bit fatigued. There are a lot of different types of training. Familiar with like drop sets and myo rep sets and cluster sets, all of this rest pause type training. And if, people aren't familiar with it, they can look up myo reps and rest pause and things like that. All of these techniques really let you get in a lot of effective repetitions, a lot of growth triggering repetitions in a short period of time. Because at the end of the day, it's not really, you can only do so much volume. What you really need is to make sure that you're getting the proper stimulus. All you need to ask yourself after a session is, okay, have I done enough in this session to convince my body to invest in bigger muscles? Because that's a big investment. And so I usually tell people, look, if you can only do weight training sessions 2 to 3 times a week, and you only have 45 minutes for each session, or 2 sessions per week, and you only have 45 to 50 minutes, you can use a lot of this cluster style training to get in a lot of effective repetitions. You may only have to do 2 to 3 sets for back. But if you do a set of rows, and you do 10 repetitions and rest for 10 seconds, and do 5 more repetitions and rest for 10 seconds and 5 more repetitions, like that myo reps type deal, you can get in a lot of effective stimulating repetitions for your back muscles in a short period of time. So I would say to people who are like, hey, how am I going to get, volume is so important. I will say that, once again, quality and density and proper tension and proper stimulation, all that's more important than volume. Volume is one way of addressing this problem of getting that stimulus. If I can do 10 sets of biceps in a single session, and in every single set, obviously, if I'm going to failure, I can't do more than 2 or 3 sets per session. You can't. So a lot of this work is going to be at relatively low intensity. And you think, okay, well, I can't do 10 sets of biceps. I can only do 3. Great. Do some rest pause. Do some myo reps. Do that. You're going to get 80, 90% of the same stimulus as those other people doing 10 sets. And you're going to get it in 3 sets. There's diminishing returns. But so what that's going to mean is a little bit like we talked about with the running. Like when you're trying to do the minimum effective dose, you need to make it that much more efficient. So if you're only able to do 3 sets of legs, you can't just sit there and, you see people going through the motions on their leg extensions. They'll do 4 sets. Okay, I'll do the 5th set. And you see them do the last repetition and they look like they're just bored. You can't do that. You have to be pushing it to 1 rep in reserve and resting and then hitting another set a couple seconds later. And so again, it's telling people, hey, look, all that really matters is that you have asked the muscle to do more than it wanted to do on that day, and focus on the quality. And you can get plenty of growth from 2 sessions per week if you follow those techniques. Mike Menser, he was that old school bodybuilder. He was known for this system of training called heavy duty, which used to be called HIIT, H-I-T, high intensity training. And what made him popular was he was a very good bodybuilder. He was an IFBB pro, professional bodybuilder, top line. And he would always say all he did per week was per session was 1 set per muscle group. And of course, his idea of doing a set was he would do a leg press and he would do 10 repetitions. And then he would rest a couple seconds and do a couple more repetitions. And he would drop 1 plate off and do a couple more repetitions. And then he would have people help him push out forced reps to failure, then take a couple more plates off. And until at the end of this set, he was completely destroyed. He could barely get up from the leg press because he's been there for 8 minutes doing 1 drop set after. And that was his 1 set. But he would get tremendous growth from it. So I think, again, this kind of goes back to the whole hybrid concept, is not necessarily how can I work more, but how can I work better? How can I make this session more effective in a short period of time? Okay, here's what I need to do. So that's really it. Just say that these are different techniques you can focus on to get in more work in a short period of time.
And volume-wise, what would you say is for a hybrid athlete, the volume required for growth, the minimum effective dose for growth?
The minimum effective dose for growth, I would usually say, look, per major muscle group. And we're talking upper body push-pull, lower body push-pull. I'd say, look, if you can get in 8 high-quality sets per movement like that, Don't think about individual muscles because it's almost impossible to break it down. I do shoulders and I do incline press and I do flies. How many sets for chest that? Don't even worry about that. Think 8 high-quality sets per major movement. So upper body push, 8 high-quality sets per week. Upper body pull, 8 high-quality sets per week. And by high quality, I mean like sets where after you're done with the set, you're almost spent. You could do maybe 2 to 3. So that can be per session. Like let's say you do 2 sessions per week. And one day is upper push pull or upper push and lower push or whatever else. Okay, great. That's 16 work sets in that session. That can be 2 upper body exercises and 2 lower body of 4 high quality sets each. Once you put in warm-ups in there, there's your session and you will still get great results.
One thing that I see with some clients is that I know that they are not pushing really hard. Like when they're doing legs and I have them doing like 4 sets of 10 squats, doing sets of 10 in squats, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And then some deadlift and on the same realm, and they are done and they're like, man, what else can I do? And I'm like, no, that you didn't. Like if I do that, I'm exhausted and I want to go away from the gym. I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people underestimate themselves. I mean, how many times have even just you've done a set and you think, I wonder if I can do more. And like I said, you'll be doing leg press or leg extensions. Leg extensions, I always point out because people go way too light on those. And you're like, okay, I've done 10. Let me see how many I can do. And you do 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And so I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the reason they haven't been seeing progress is that they've been doing so much less work than their body is capable of that they're not really triggering an adaptation. And we see that a lot because if you do like a serious hard set until you're almost at failure, and then you go and you do it again, and then you pick a second leg exercise and you do the same thing, 2 hard sets almost to failure, you're probably not going to be asking to do more. You're going to probably say, okay, that's good. So especially like, see people do like hamstring curls are a great example because people never push those. You have people do 2 heavy sets of hamstring curls almost to failure. They're not going to be able to walk. The last thing they're going to do is ask for more work.
You're going to cramp yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, one thing that I do with my clients mainly with beginners, like my job on the first month or 2 is like taking them to near failure, like assuring that they are doing effective reps.
Yeah.
And I always do that kind of test, like when I know they're doing with this weight after 2 weeks and they are doing the same weight, I'm like, okay, let's do max reps in each set. How much can you do?
Yeah.
And they can do like 10 more reps.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, I don't want to say it's because people are lazy, because I don't think that's it. I think people underestimate themselves.
Yeah.
They think, oh, that was hard, I can't do any more. And you go, you can do more. Just have some faith that you can do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the main benefit of strength training for marathon and ultramarathon runners?
There are a couple of big advantages. Strength training, especially in combination with plyometrics, one of the main things that you do that strength training can do is it improves gait efficiency. And that sounds like, okay, what does that mean? But a lot of adaptations to strength training that include improved like proprioception, like knowledge of where your body is, improved balance, improved rate of force development, all of that has the main role of reducing the amount of energy you waste in every single stride. So a lot of runners with a slow rate of force production who don't do any strength training, when they run, most people bounce quite a bit when they run. The stronger and more efficient you are, the more effectively you absorb the impact when you hit the ground and translate that into forward movement. If you look at an inefficient runner when they run, their center of gravity is bouncing up and down and up and down and up and down. That's increased impact force on the ground. That is every inch that you go up in every running stride is wasted energy. Strength training, basically what marathon runners will see is not only are they wasting less energy in bouncing, but they are actually, in studies will confirm, they are consuming less oxygen per mile. And what that basically means is it's one of the gold standards for running efficiency is how much oxygen are you using to run a mile, because oxygen is a pretty good measurement of, how much energy our cells are producing. Strength training means that athletes will sometimes use anywhere between like 5 and 10%. Like taking athletes who are good runners who've never done strength training and then do like an 8-week strength training program, we'll see things like 5 to 10% reductions sometimes in oxygen, and that's an improvement in efficiency over that time period. Now, of course, those numbers vary. You can find different studies looking at different things, but that's along the lines. And some people may say, well, that's only like 5%. That's a lot of time spent training in the weight room just for a little bit of improvement. But if you think about it, most people would be very happy if they said, hey, look, I can improve your VO2 max by 5 or 10%. They'd go, well, yeah, I'll take that. That's a whole season of training.
Yeah, in 8 weeks.
In 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks, they say, hey, look, I can. And they're going to say, oh my God, how hard do I have to train for that? I go, you don't have to. You're just going to have to get in the weight room twice a week and do some good quality lifting. So it's all of those things, especially because strength training is also very important. Because if you combine your plyometrics and your strength training and do things like contrast training and all that, it's a great way to do both. And at the end of the day, you're going to have more efficient runners who might even have a lower likelihood of some chronic running injuries.
Do you think there are special, well, not special, but best exercises for runners in the strength training, or anything that it's a good program with good quality sets?
Yeah, I think pretty much anything, because I think it's really easy to underestimate how full body a lot of good movements are. Like, for example, even the squat. People say, oh, well, a squat is just a single range of motion. But you think about unracking and walking back and bracing and balancing and all the muscular action and everything else. You are improving your balance, you're improving your coordination, you're improving all these muscles. So I think pretty much any good program is going to do that. And I would say for runners, as much as anything, it's also any movements that challenge you. So, that's one of the reasons why things like Bulgarian split squats are so good as well, because the balance is challenging to that. So not only is it a really good exercise for your legs, but you also have to work on side-to-side balance, and it highlights any sort of instabilities or asymmetries that you have. So I think, honestly, for runners, compound movements are always best, just because there's much more of a balance component to it. And as long as you have one good strength movement that you can progress really well in, and one movement that really challenges your balance and coordination, I think you've got a good foundation to a program.
And for ultra runners, that you were saying that you can improve the efficiency, like in an uphill.
Yeah.
If you're stronger, you will take less energy to go uphill.
Yep. Yeah, you will. And in fact, improving things like, because in uphill running, of course, you don't have a lot of that same rebound. What you actually have then is strength in movements like triple extension, and strength especially in deeper ranges of motion. So a lot of times in running, when you're running on the flat, it's a very limited range of motion you're running in. But things like walking lunges, deep squats, things like that really work your muscles at that lengthened range of motion, which then can actually come into play and improve your strength and durability and force production running uphill. The other thing is running downhill, especially for ultra runners. So the repeat bout effect, your body's ability to resist damage and resist discomfort and stress and all that. Strength training, for example, on like your quadriceps, can actually help improve your body's ability to resist damage on something like a downhill run. One of our running coaches, he's one of his name is Nicodemus Holland, now De La Rosa. He is one of the guys who ran the Barkley Marathon, which is the one that only has, I think, 20 finishers now ever. When he ran it, he was the youngest ever winner of that race. And one of the things he mentioned from doing more strength training, he's not a big guy, he's still very much built like a runner, but he says that at mile 70 of his ultras, he still feels like he can race. He's not just trying to survive, because his legs are more durable, the downhills don't destroy him as badly. So even if somebody says, hey, I am just an ultra runner, I don't care about strength training, I don't care about physique, I don't care about anything else, I just want to be better, you tell them, well, how would you like to be able to still be racing the second half of the run, not just trying to survive it? That's huge.
That's huge.
Yeah.
For HYROX, what is the main thing athletes and coaches get wrong about training for it?
I would say a lot of coaches like spending a lot of time training athletes while fatigued and saying, we need to work on your compromise running, and we're going to do nothing but metcons and medleys and all that. And I think training HYROX specific stuff can be good, but it's also important to work on your fundamentals. If you want to be a better runner, you need to have a good running program. You can't just have your running be in between sets of wall balls, and you can't just do endless complexes, because you're always going to be training fatigued. And overall systemic fatigue is going to make it harder for you to trigger running adaptations. Because to adapt properly to running, it's just like adapting properly to lifting. You need to target specific types of stress to get better at this discipline. If you're just stressing everything and you're constantly doing metcons and you're constantly doing medleys and supersets, you're going to be so systemically tired that you may not hit that threshold for stimulus in any one area. If I just go back and forth and just do a lap around a track and then squat, and then a lap around a track and squat, and lap around a track and squat, am I going to hit my threshold in running, or are my legs going to be so tired from every squat set that my running is going to be slow? And am I going to be breathing so hard from running that I'm not going to be able to brace during my squat, and I'm not going to be able to lift as much as I could? So I think a lot of coaches spend so much time training their athletes compromised, training them when they're fatigued and having them run right after they lift and having them do They don't spend enough time focusing on every component of athletic ability and training that in the best way for that discipline. If I want my HYROX athlete to be a better runner, I need to have them doing some really high quality running. If I want them to be stronger, I need them to do some high quality lifting, where their strength is the limiting factor. We are pushing their strength, and that becomes what adapts. So that would be the biggest thing. Spend some time focusing on those individual disciplines.
Yeah. So man, almost after a decade after publishing the book, this type of training is getting so much hype around it. Mm-hmm. How does it feel for you, like experiencing it right now? And did you imagine
honestly,
what it would become after you published the book?
I never did. I never imagined it. I thought that it would actually have a lot more traction in the medical community. Because very early on, actually, one of my first clients was, Dr. Spencer Nadolski. He's he was actually
the doc who lived.
Yes,
I followed him for a while.
Yeah. Actually, this was like 10 years ago. He was one of my clients for a while, and he said, this type of training is exactly what I would recommend for all my lifestyle and overweight clients and patients, because he says this is health. And again, remember, at the time, everything was, if you want to be a good bodybuilder, if you want to train for physique, you need to just do this. And a lot of training was pretty unhealthy for people, because it was like somebody said, oh, you know what, I have high blood pressure, maybe I should get into running. And the running coaches would say, don't lift. The running community says, no, don't weight train. They go, well, my doctor said I should weight train too. So they go to a personal trainer who says, oh, you shouldn't be running. So it was really hard. I thought hybrid training would be the kind of thing that a lot of the health and wellness community wanted to really push, because they were like, aha, this is how we can design good programs to make everyone healthy and help them live longer and everything else. I never thought the athletic side of it would catch on the way it did. And I think there are a couple people who I think did a great job of really capturing public imagination on this and people seeing what was possible. And when I wrote the first book, I was just like one guy yelling in the corner, like, hey, this is really cool, guys. Everyone, hey, it's over here. And, at the time, and I think one of the reasons why I like focusing on education, not so much what I did, is when it's one person, people can easily write it off as, oh, well, this person is just, this is how they've always trained, or this person, has genetics, or, it's drugs, or they'll always find some reason to invalidate a single person who's doing something. But when you see it over and over and over again, and you see all these different people succeeding and showing what's really possible, that's when people get interested. I never thought in a million years I would see the word everywhere, to the point where, it's almost become a running joke. I'll see it on meme sites where people are like, hybrid athlete is just another word for, and it becomes some joke. Everyone's heard of it. And to me, that just blows my mind, because I literally made up the name when I was on the deadline to write the book. So, yeah.
But it was a pretty damn good names.
Hey, thank you. Yeah. I honestly, man, I love it. I love it because I think it's a fun way to train. the biggest thing for hybrid training for me was always I just wanted to tell people whatever you want to do, you can do it. Don't let anyone in any community tell you that this type of event isn't meant for you, or oh, you're too big to run, or you're a runner, like nah, you shouldn't lift heavy and all that. You could do whatever you want. And my whole goal was just to give people a couple of guidelines to help them do it and help them not get frustrated in the process.
Yeah, and it has been really useful.
Yeah.
So man, I wanted to have more time on the episode because one of the parts that I enjoyed the most out of these conversations is getting to know the guests on the personal side too. So the next questions are not going to be training related.
Okay.
And the first one would be, what would you say is your life purpose?
Oh man.
I'm getting deep.
Yeah. So, I always thought, I think my biggest thing is I tried too much to have, I think early on in my career, I went through a lot of different careers. I just wanted to be the best at something. I wanted to come up with some new discovery or, really make my name, because at first I was in like pharmaceuticals and research and then in training. I said, I want to be known for doing something great. I want to do something revolutionary and all that. I think as time has gone on, I think my life's purpose is, I realize that coming up with anything new is very difficult. But the main thing that I want to be able to do is become someone who can communicate others' ideas and spread information. If I learn something, that doesn't do me any good. I want to learn things and then be able to get that information out to other people speaking in a language they can understand, metaphorically, because this is being translated. But basically saying, okay, I can learn all the science I want. I can learn everything I can about training. If I can't communicate that to everybody else and serve as like a conduit or serve as like a reflection for good ideas, I don't think there's a purpose to it. I think my responsibility in this space, as I put it on myself, my purpose has honestly just been to be an educator. Not because I know everything, far from it, but because I think I'm good at meeting people where they're at. I'm good at learning something and saying, okay, here's something I've learned. Let me show this to you in such a way that you can understand it. So I think that's my purpose. I think my purpose is to just be a source of spreading good ideas and breaking down barriers between really good but complex ideas and a practical, simple way for people to understand it. So,
and that's big, and mainly in fitness, where a lot of scientific research is really hard to understand.
Yeah,
and also not all of it is applicable to anyone. So,
right,
that's a big thing, because if you can take all of that, like you have done it, and just give the important part to the people, that I believe that's big.
I think that's it, because I think everyone wants to learn. They want to do the best, but I think it's very difficult, especially when you're very science minded and everything else. It's very difficult to realize that what is the most important to you is all this science, but other people have other things that are important to them, and they just want to know. They're coming to you because they just want to know what they should know, and so let me take all of this research here and condense it into one or two important things for this person there. I'll have done my job. I'm not the person sitting here creating this stuff. I am the person sitting here and helping sort it out. And I think that's what a good communicator does. And I think that's kind of where I've seen myself, certainly in the last couple of years.
How have you changed your mind, your ideas, perception since you released the book until now?
I think I've gotten a lot more open-minded to different types of training. I think what I realized is that there are a lot of different things that can work. And I think a lot of the things I did early on worked very well for somebody who is pretty young and good at a lot of this stuff. And I think my biggest changes, especially in endurance sport, have been to be a little bit less about every session's got to grind you into the ground, and a lot more about, I think I'm a lot more process oriented now. I'm a lot more about high quality. I'm a lot more about lower intensity running. I'm not super into I'm less about rules. I used to say 80-20, polarized training, zone 2 and zone 4, that's it. I don't believe that anymore. In weight training, I used to say like, yeah, you know, powerlifting has to be conjugate West Side style, and now I'm like, hey, full body sessions can work. I think the biggest thing I've changed my mind on is that there are a lot of different ways to do things, and the rules are less about you have to do this and you can't do this, and more about, well, if you do this, you should probably do a little of this. So I know that's kind of a really muddy answer, but I think I've just like, as time has gone on and I've learned more, I realize that the rules are more guidelines than they are rules. And yeah, there's a lot of different, I think a lot of this comes from meeting a lot of people who are very intelligent, who are doing things differently, and realizing that those things work too. And I've got to understand why they work and realize that the reasons that those things work are the same reasons my stuff worked, but it wasn't the reasons I thought. I thought my stuff worked because of these rules here, and really it works because of these guidelines here. You know, it's so, I know that's kind of a, like I said, a complicated answer, but I think, yeah, just be more open-minded.
No, but I think I understand it, because I also encountered like, I believe that a lot of people, a lot of professionals, I've known professionals that are amazing and they're very knowledgeable in their stuff, and then they don't know a lot of stuff in other areas.
Yeah.
Like when they try to, they are not very knowledgeable. And at first I was also more close-minded to hearing to other opinions. But then I realized also that like these people have a lot of knowledge and they know a lot because of something. Like
Yeah.
they didn't get to be doctors and whatever you think, because or like the endurance coaches that are, or the coaches for Olympic athletes, that sometimes they are like based on ancient methods, but they know something, even though they are
Exactly.
not in the modern area. They know something, and I come to find also that I can learn from anyone, and it doesn't have to be like your word or mine.
I think that's actually the biggest thing. If somebody says something, if somebody came to me 10 years ago and said, hey, here's this one person that says something, what do you think of what they have to say? And let's say I think what the person says is wrong. I used to look at arguments I would disagree with and say, let me find all the flaws in that argument. I think now when I look at it, I say, let me try to find all the things that are right in that argument. And I think approaching things that way now, approaching things as in, okay, let me see what they're doing right. Let me see what parts of their argument are true. That has not only let me learn from a lot more people, but I think it also makes me much more effective at communicating, because I am now able to like meet people where they're at and say, okay, I understand why you do this. And it's probably been working because of this, but here are some things you might want to change, rather than saying, well, this is wrong and here's why it's wrong. Yeah.
I hope everything goes badly for you.
Exactly.
This is a phrase from my dad on the opportunity to rise from failures.
Yes.
So tell me one failure that at the moment it felt very, very bad, and then you transform it into a success.
Oof. Honestly, probably my first whole career. First 10 years of my life that I spent working in pharmaceuticals. Yeah, so I did a lot of things there. You know, I started out doing like project management, helping manage clinical trials and keep all the pieces together, and started working then on the program design side of things and all of that. And I was okay at it, but I was never great. I never had the level of organization I needed. I eventually moved into consulting, and that's where I thought I wanted to, that was, I thought, the pinnacle of my career. I always wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to be in healthcare consulting. I was working with a hospital system. That's who my main project was with, and we were looking at all their different service areas and insurance. I said, this is what I wanted to do, and I realized I hated it. And I hated it because not only was I didn't feel like I could add anything to it, but I think I spent a lot of my career covering up a lot of my shortcomings in that area. And I think looking back on it now, in my career, I had a lot more dead ends and failures than I thought I would have. And I think there are some regrets to it, certainly. You think, wow, you spent 10 years of your life doing something and you basically started from scratch. But I think I learned so much from that. There are so many things I learned in the process of working in pharma and working on clinical trials that at the time I thought this is useless, but it's actually helped me now. And I think there are some failures where you go, wow, I just planned everything wrong and it was a disaster, and that race was terrible or that project was terrible. And there are some failures where you just say, well, that was just all totally wrong for me. That whole career or that whole hobby that I was working on, that whole relationship, it was all a mistake. But I think realizing that you can still take a lot of things that you learned or that you were forced to do that you didn't like, that may have still taught you a lot of things. Because as much as I hated the organization side, it made me better at it. As much as I hated sometimes doing like the stats analysis on things, it helped me understand. So I think the fact that that first career was arguably a failure, first of all, that's the only thing that let me get into this space. Because I knew I had no choice. I needed to get out of that. I hated it so much. If I didn't feel like that was about to come crashing down, I think I probably would have just stayed as a personal trainer on the side. So having something like that fail completely forced me to make bigger steps elsewhere. And I think a lot of people, especially if they're people who are interested in getting into like fitness or anything else, and they say, well, should I go back to school for exercise science? And the thing I'll tell them first is, okay, well, what has your career been up to this point? Because you've probably learned so much in that career that some of it is still applicable. All of that is part of you now. Even if you don't associate with what that career was anymore, all that's still part of you. Figure out what that did to make you better and what you've learned and what you can use from that to communicate to others, because it's going to give you something. So I think that's maybe more it's not that failures always mean you pick yourself up and try again. Sometimes a failure is just a way of saying, okay, you know what, that didn't work out, but I'm never going to do it again. But that doesn't mean that in the process of trying to do it, I didn't still benefit quite a bit. So
yeah, that's amazing, and it always happens. Like, I believe in the fitness space for coaches, that's something really good to learn from, because I believe that a lot of coaches come from that background.
Yeah,
where I actually do. Where I studied, I'm a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that I love this stuff. And then what do? I wasted my time. Like, I should have studied exercise science. But no, I can see how useful, and all the chemistry that I took, all the physics, it translated into understanding.
Absolutely. And that's just it. And then, like, in the process, a mechanical engineer who now knows fitness, you probably can analyze things in movement and, even parts of like the physics of like, bikes and, exercise machines, and looking at, there's so many things that you have such a unique insight on that you may not even realize how earth-shattering, how mind-blowing some of that may be to other people in the space. So that's such an asset. So, exactly.
Yeah. If you could appear in front of your 16-year-old self and tell him something, whatever, give some advice, what would you say to him?
I think probably two things. First would just be, it's going to be okay. Because I think 16-year-old me didn't always think that was going to be how everything was. I think when I was younger, I felt a lot of pressure to make decisions. I felt like, okay, well, I need to figure out where I want to go to college, which means I need to know what I want to do. And, I need to have all of this figured out. And it was overwhelming for me when I was younger. And feeling like I had to have the answers then was really, really difficult. Because I was 16, I didn't know anything. And I think if I just told him, like, it's okay, you're going to make mistakes, but they're going to work out. Because nothing you do now is going to be irreversible. Everything you do now is going to get you somewhere, and it's not like you're going to go down a false path and have to come all the way back and restart. That's not how life works. Life is not a series of dead ends where you have to go back. Life is just a series of endless, like, yes, it's a maze, but it's all still going forward. So I think I would have told myself, hey, whatever you want to do, just keep doing it. It's all going to work out, because you're still going to be able to change your life as your life changes you. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be buy NVIDIA stock. That would be about it. So
That would be a good advice.
that's pretty much it. But yeah. Yeah.
I also saw that you posted something like 1 week or 2 weeks ago where, and I believe it's huge because I believe so many coaches like admire you and know that you have accomplished a lot of stuff. You are a best-selling author. You wrote the hybrid athlete. You coined the term, and you published like, I still don't know what I'm doing. Like, and I believe that's big because no one, no matter how successful he is or she is, no one in this world knows what he's doing or she's doing.
Yeah. And there was I think it was that Calvin and Hobbes was one of the things I was thinking of when his parents were lying there. Their house had just gotten broken into, and the parents are sitting there. The father's sitting there wide awake, and he's all stressed out. And he basically tells his wife, he's like, I don't think I would have been in such a hurry to grow up if I knew the whole thing was ad-libbed. Like, we're just figuring it out as we go along. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are, or how much you think there's. Everybody, even the top of their game, is still going to sometimes sit back and say, wow, I don't know anything. And like that's okay. That's part of the excitement. I think the minute you think you know everything is the minute you stop trying to learn. I think you need a certain amount of that humility. You need to constantly be reminded what you don't know, because that's going to keep you learning. And I think the people who finally think they figured it all out, those are the ones who end up being the most ignorant. Yeah. So I would say that if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I don't know anything about this, or like who hired me to be a trainer? I don't actually know that much. You're like, wait, somebody asked me on a podcast, or they asked me to speak at this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. There are a lot of people who think that. They think I'm not good enough to be here. It's because you think you're not good enough to be there that you're going to go out there and you're going to keep researching and you're going to keep analyzing everything. Don't overdo it. At the end of the day, be like, okay, I'm okay. Like, I don't have to prove anything. But also, like, the fact that you think you don't know is what keeps you hungry. It's what keeps you learning. It's what keeps you humble. And all of those are why people like you. So I want to always tell people that.
That thought comes like once a week for me. Like,
all the time. All the time. Oh, my God. And it's so hard. And it is really hard, too, because I think there are a lot of people who will still sometimes say, well, you don't know anything. And it's like, and you realize how many, somebody goes up to you and goes, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And you'll just be like, you know what? Maybe I don't. But here's what I do know. Take it or leave it, So It's okay. Yeah.
This is a question from the last guest. What would you do if you went blind?
If I went blind?
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, my dog is blind. Okay. And I know this sounds like a bad way to start, but it's true. I think one of the things that I've actually learned from him is that he doesn't really know that anyone else can see. He only feels like he's missing out on it so much. The only reason I think he's missing out is because I personally think he is. But what I've seen is how much of other things he's developed in his life that he can still do. And I realize how much I rely on my site. I rely on it for video games. I rely on it for running and everything else. Early in my career, I had the privilege to work with a lot of athletes with disabilities, amputees, blind athletes, deaf athletes. And I realized that they used to say it's not the disability, it's the ability that counts. They spend a lot of their time trying and doing things that a lot of us maybe wouldn't even think of, because they now have to do it. And I think what I would probably do if I were, obviously I would no longer be as good as video games, but I think I would probably find myself gravitating back towards like things like piano playing, which I hadn't done in ages. I would still probably be able to lift. I might not be able to, take my bike out for a ride, but I think there would be a lot of adjustments. But I think I would force myself to get back into a lot of other things that I think I've neglected. And I know it's a hard thing to ask because there are going to be a lot of people who may be vision impaired. And frankly, before I got eye surgery, I was almost legally blind without corrective lenses. There are going to be a lot of people who go, well, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not. I don't. But I can say that there are a lot of things I think I've given up because I take a lot of things for granted right now. and I let myself get carried away with things like scrolling Instagram and all that, I would have to limit some of that. But I think it would force me to go back and indulge in a lot of other things, develop a lot of other things that I think I've neglected, because that's been the unfortunate reality.
This question comes from a professional blind soccer player.
Yeah.
I interviewed that's
awesome.
last week. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And last one, a question that you would like to leave for the next guest.
Question for the next guest. What would you do if nobody would ever know anything about your training sessions, or your physical accomplishments? Nobody would ever see any of it. Nobody knew, nobody would care, you could never tell anybody, and like your physique didn't matter, nothing. In other words, would you still have any sort of physical activity as a hobby of yours if it made no difference to anyone else whatsoever?
That's an amazing question.
I think it'd be interesting, because I think it might change some of what we do, but I don't know. I'd be curious how it'd be answered.
Yeah, because sometimes we put all of the personality in that.
Yeah.
In fitness.
Sorry.
No, tell.
I was going to say, because even I think some of us even sometimes just want to be a little bit inspirational to others. Because because people give a lot of like influencers a hard time and go, well, why are they doing that ridiculous thing and all that? And sometimes it's just entertainment, and sometimes it's because they want to show other people what's physically capable. Let's go. If you couldn't do that, what would you do? So anyway, yeah.
Man, for courses, learning, coaching from you, where can people follow you, contact you, and Complete Human Performance?
Yep. So Instagram, alex.viada, and Complete Human Performance, all one word on Instagram, or just completehumanperformance.com. Those are the best ways. We've got most of our content up there. We got a whole lot of free content, but also all different kinds of coaching, training programs, and so forth.
Do you want to tell something about the next book?
Yes. So the next book should be coming out next June. I have submitted I've got the manuscript finalized, so most of the text is done. I am just working on the programs, and of course the editors need to go back through it and tell me how terrible it is, and rewrite it from. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, that's going to be coming out. It is going to be a much more comprehensive guide to all things hybrid training, how to develop your own programs, critical parts of endurance training and strength training and all of that. So it's going to be hopefully everything that I've learned in the last however many years. I don't know. I'm old, I forget. However many years, all put down into a book. So that should be out soon.
How much different from the first one would it be?
The first one was a collection of mostly like articles and other ideas I had between like 2009 and 2012. And they were all finally put in book form. This is going to be an actual guide on here's how to design endurance training. Here are endurance training, like here's the physiology behind it. Same thing for strength training. Okay, here are the basic rules now for putting together a hybrid program. Hopefully written in such a way that people can look at it and they go, okay, cool. I now have 5 steps I need to follow to take my ideas and what I want to do and put them into an actual training program. So that's going to be it. I think the first book was basically telling people, hey, it can be done. And this book is saying, and here's how you do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Man, this has been an amazing episode. I've enjoyed it so much, and I could continue for hours, talking everything from life to strength to endurance, whatever. But I just want to thank you a lot for all of the valuable information, and I'm really very grateful for your time.
Absolutely, man. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Si eres un atleta híbrido o te gustaría convertirte en un atleta híbrido, yo puedo ser tu coach y puedes contactarme a través de Instagram @memosilva.fit. Con eso terminamos el episodio de hoy. No olvides que la mejor forma de apoyar este podcast es calificando con 5 estrellas en Spotify y Apple, así como dejando una reseña en Apple Podcast y compartiendo el episodio con alguien que crees que podría interesarle. También recuerda escribirme tus comentarios y seguirme en @memosilva.fit, y nos escuchamos la próxima semana. Fitness es lo que tú decides que es mejor para tu vida.